Hello, hello, hello. What is good, everybody? My name is Alckemy. I am dropping an album in 2 days, and to kind of lead up to things like that, I thought that I would talk about some key things that I think would be extremely beneficial to anybody that's out there trying to get better at writing bass music. So today's video is going to be a free masterclass on understanding the approach to getting movement within bass. And I'm hoping that by the end of this, you will kind of like have the right mindset within understanding how to like make movement or how to make bass lines a little bit better. There is a little bit of compositional, discussion that we're going to have. But if you guys are interested, I wanted to do this class for free because this is also a segue into, hey, Xenowave, to get into the master classes that I have available, the memberships that I have. So yeah, and since this is a live setting thing, if anybody wants to come in and ask questions, or if you all have questions within the comment section, I'd be more than happy to answer that if I can. So, good, man. We're just gonna kind of talk about really just like bass and like how to approach it, or certain ways to approach it rather, and kind of just like how to. I don't know. I've had such an awesome like revelation in making stuff as of late. And hey, Rung, what's going on? And it's been really amazing to like kind of just see the picture for what it is. So when it comes to basses and stuff, hopefully my voice is decent. It's probably a little bit quiet, but when it comes to basses and stuff, like it can be obviously as complicated or as simple as you want it to be. It could literally be a sine wave, and then you have something called modulation and automation, which are the main two things to how to change a bass over time. When you are talking about bass, I think that the picture delta is the best way to describe something like this, because even if you don't have anything other than a volume shaper, if I were to take something like this and create just a single F note, let's go ahead and just add some distortion to this so that way it's a little bit easier for people who don't have headphones to be able to tell what the heck is going on. But if you were to have something that's very simple, just like this, hopefully that's a little bit more audible now. There we go. And you were to do the first method, which is automation here. This means that over time, this is going to change this parameter, which is just the volume. So this is actually pretty interesting, because if we divide this in half and then we duplicate this 4 times, then this goes into creating something that is rhythmic. And the reason why this is significant is because this is the first aspect, or the first introduction to understanding that your bass movement doesn't have to be that complicated. So take a listen to this. Now, I want you to listen to this critically for just a second, and I want you to close your eyes if possible and really think about what could go well with this. This is at 85 BPM. So when you start to hear stuff like this, when you start to hear the modulation and movement, it's a one-note bass line, right? Which I would say that one-note bass lines are probably the hardest to write as far as making something interesting. But what we've done was we've taken something that is just a constant, which is just, right? So imagine, playing a beat over this that is just, again, a single note. Yay. And then you have something that is a little bit more interesting via the movement from something like automation. So when you start pitting two things together against each other, you are doing one of the most important things when it comes into bass lines in general, which I know that I haven't done anything that interesting yet, but I'm just trying to paint the picture about how easy it is to understand like making basses and phrases in general. But we took a single note and added one parameter to it, the most basic of all perhaps, and made it a lot more interesting just by creating a rhythm out of it. So now that we have something like that, we have this kind of automation thing that kind of helps us, establish something that's more interesting, well, that's where you get into these ideas of exploring the sound design. I want this to be more interesting. So what am I going to do that's going to enhance the movement, right? That's where we're kind of coming into play on this. So for example, I'm just going to use a limiter here, and I'm going to turn this up just a little bit, but now I'm going to get into some FM. So if I go here and just add just a little bit, this is off right now because of the modulation, so I need to be over here. Now we'll get into the second piece of this, which is using a modulator, which is an LFO, or any of the stuff that you have down here, to where automation is where you do things by hand and it manually changes over time, whereas something like a modulator, like an LFO or randomizer, it changes as the note is playing or off. It's you don't have to touch it, long story short. So with that, right, if we set everything to match the same movement of our automation here, kind of like so, and we go, okay, well, I am going to make this move over time as well. Then whenever we play this, all we have to do is set it to be the same timing. Or you don't have to have the same timing. I think it would be a little bit easier to do that, but if everything is the same timing, then this is going to match the movement of what we have here. Hit 1, for some reason that's not. And suddenly it sounds like a Samus power-up. So imagine if we took this same idea about movement and we applied it to everything else or every other kind of effect that we have. One of the biggest examples of this would be the idea about creating more monster movement, which one of the easiest ways to do that is to create a little bit of a boost here in your low mids. It doesn't need to be quite this much. Finally got that wave beam. So likewise, we can do this again, but we can switch this over to a notch and flip this, so that way these are being pit against each other. But this is thematic in the way that we're talking about building movement. And again, it's a very simple shape. It's just a single exponential line. But with this, you can see that we're going to start to build more and more interest just off of one simple idea of 1/4 note. Now, what would happen if we change this into a Reese? So we go detune, right? And now whenever we use this, hey, Chris. Well, because of the detuning, we've added an extra element of movement within this, because now the phase cancellation is pretty much doubling up on this. And again, we're not doing anything that's too crazy, but we are introducing the idea about how to create movement within these bases. And whenever you are doing stuff, all you need is a single parameter to start with, and you need to have a little bit of imagination of when you're writing, beats or something. Like if I'm writing a bass line, if I'm writing like a halftime tune, and I am able to kind of just take a listen to this inside of my head and be like, all right, what do I want this to sound like? It doesn't necessarily have to be exact, but I can think and copy about the movements, about what's happening. And that way I can at least get kind of close, right? Because if I start with something like hi guys, I'll respond to you in just a second. But if I start with something like just a simple sine wave and I automate the volume and I go, all right, I want this to go whoa. Well, you have to use that same thing. It's almost like audiating, right? But you go whoa. And if I were to try to create something like that, it would be along the same lines of starting from maximum volume, duo, right? I forget that I can't double click on this, but duo, right? Now, if I were to take off the automation on this and hold on, let me just delete this. And now we take a listen to what this is going to do. And maybe we make this a little bit faster. And then we also set this to the volume as well. And maybe we make this unipolar. And we set this to off. Then we're starting to get close. It's not quite there yet. It's not as interesting as, you know, it's not as interesting as we hear it in our head, but we're starting to put ourselves along the path of this is what it sounds like. It's dwoof, right? And now from this being a single aspect, we can start to change these parameters to make it a little bit more interesting, or we can continue to shape it, but we're following off of the same pattern. We're following off of the same aspect of a single movement starting place. Let me catch up with chat really quick. Not to interrupt, but what does the harmonic function do in the oscillator section? It's just a way to tune the oscillator, but it tunes it by harmonics. So an octave, or a second harmonic would be an octave. I think a third harmonic would be an octave and a fifth. But it's just, all of this stuff is pretty much just tuning except for the phase. Hi, Philippe. Looking good, bro. About to sleep. Just wanted to say hi. Yo, thanks for coming in, Alpha. Good to see you, man. Okay, cool. A bit like sync in a way. No, this would be sync. The harmonic would be... So now that we have that though, we've already created movement within this. We haven't done anything that's, you know, neurobase related or anything else of the sort. It's all just kind of ready to go. So if I were to try to bring this out a little bit more, and this is where your sound design tricks are going to come into play, you can start to build off of this little by little. I'm going to back off of both of these. And something else that we can also do is we can modulate, you know, really that's the cool thing about phase blend is we just start modulating things. Now, if we make this a little bit faster, then, and we, let me go ahead and take this as well. So that way this is going to go upward and match this. Then we've created movement within this. And all we have to do, again, within this shape that we've pretty much taken, is think about, all right, well, how do I continue to make this better? How do I continue to make this stronger? How do I continue to, you know, make this into something that's actually going to be more interesting? And that's when you get into just, again, building off of a single idea of the whoa, whoa, right? Whoa, whoa. And the more that you do that, the more that you're going to start to see like, well, I can keep adding to it until it sounds cool, or I can just consider like what it is, what function that I'm trying to do in the first place. And the reason why I'm showing you like this, because I know that this isn't the most interesting sound, it is the approach to how to make something that is a little bit more interesting in that way. So let me take a break on this for a second, but I want to show you a different example of like how crazy and how complicated this goes, because this isn't really a comprehensive guide to making neurobase. This is more of like, hey, here's a concept about like how to actually write with this stuff. So whenever you have something that, you know, is very complicated and all stacked and stuff, we're going to use heart pulse because this is like my favorite sound that I've made. If we open this up, you'll see that these are mapped to a specific macro, and everything else down here is all mapped to movement or things that are based off of that. And so the idea here on Crack is to move everything. And once you do that, you get stuff like this. But all of this is being moved at random right now, right? So if I were to change this to move, right, which is what we were kind of just talking about, now listen to how everything is going to move at the same time. And now that we have something like that, we can take all of those parameters here and do something of the sort to where we kind of just create something that is in the mindset of, you know, a simple aspect of rhythm and movement. And again, this only applies to a single note, right? A single note bass line, again, in my opinion, is just, it's really hard to write like this. I don't usually have very much success creating like insane bass lines that's just a single note, unless if you take a single phrase and then you like repeat that. So it'd be like, but when you have something like that, you can adjust this to make everything that is built in within this centered around that piece of movement. And that's where you're going to find success in creating that. Because if you think about this, like, again, just take a listen to it. What do you hear? What other elements do you hear whenever you are listening to this phrase, right? So you have the boom, 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 and that's how you start to get inspired. That's how you start to get things that are a little bit more interesting, is you take that phrase and you start to use that as a means of filling in the gap. And what we're doing here is not actually like how I usually write tunes, but what is important is understanding that you are using your bass as a means of rhythm in which to create more rhythmic elements. When you are making bass music, essentially, depending on, it's going to depend, but when you are making bass music, you are trying to create an intense or an intricate relationship between your elements that are dancing together, right? So even if you just did something very basic, so I'm going to take this and we're just going to write a very basic, like, addition to this. So hold on one second. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off all the reverb and just leave space. So we bounce this out, and then I'm going to spaces, by the way, spaces. And then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to move this just a little bit over. So now we should have something like this. Right? It's already there. Now you just need to fill in the gaps because everything is centered around that idea. The boom, boom. Hey, Delphine Beats. Hello, Alex. Big ups, man. I saw that you were live just now. I hope that you're doing well. But now that you have something like that, right, we can start to play. We can start to do very, very simple things, just kind of like this. I'm not going to do anything too complicated. I'm just going to create kind of like a hat. Maybe this might be soloed. It's soloed. So if I were to grab this little guy and just make it a little bit more, actually, yeah, I'm going to go down. I'm going to move that up just a little bit. And add some distortion. This is slowly becoming a hat, a hat masterclass. No, I'm kidding. Right? So now that you have something like this, now that's when we start to build the dynamic relationship between these two. This is where things start to come together, because without trying to throw a kick snare on this, which is not what I would recommend, you already know where the kick snare is supposed to go, usually. But when you have something like this and you start to think about how to create rhythm or something along the sort with this, we go maybe something like this. See, these are just being played along the initial notes, and then we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Let me turn that off, sorry. Now, whenever we move this a little bit, so we can take all of these and kind of just shift these off like so, and then we can move this one off just a little bit more. So this one can be a little bit early. This one can be a little bit early. Something of the sort, kind of like this. You know, maybe on this one we can just bounce this out, and then we can lower this. Or we can So now that we have this, we're starting to create a relationship between everything. And whenever you have movement within this, it's immediately inspiring, because you can do something like this to where it's just 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then maybe on this one, we start this here. And again, I'm not necessarily trying to produce right now. It's more just like here is a concept. But if we were to do something very, very simple where we fade this in, and maybe on this as well, we change up the hat pattern just a little bit. So we've got the dun, 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 dun. So maybe on this one, we can pull this one off, kind of like so, and make it super late. And then duplicate that. So now we've got a relationship between the two, or it's like alternating. One note, that's it. And now what is more important is that between all of this, you start to see the spaces, right? We've got the boom, 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 and that is where you start to think about adding your fills. This is where you start to think about doing stuff kind of like this. 1, 2, 1, 2, fill, 1, 2, 1, 2, different fill, right? So I can just turn the generator on this, but take a listen to this now. And from there, you can start to see like how things are building off of each other. But the more that you treat your bass like a piece of percussion, or the more that you treat it like an aspect of rhythm, that's where things are going to start to get into making it feel like you can do a lot more with it without having to like, well, shit, do a lot more with it. So that's the first aspect of this that I wanted to teach, because once you understand this, then making bass lines in that matter is about focusing on the bass, right? Because if you're making bass music, what's the most important thing? Is the low end, the low mid region of making interesting things like that. And again, I know that I'm not teaching the neurobass aspect of this. That's what the masterclasses are for. You can also just watch a comprehensive guide to neurobass 3. But in that aspect, or in light of that, that's where you can kind of take inspiration from that and make something that is more simple. So take all that away. Let's talk about the second one, which is equally as important. And this is when you start to get into, I actually am going to design this one, but this is where you start to get into that idea of notes, because notes are also a matter of modulation, right? So if you've got something that's an aspect of rhythm, what you want to focus on is creating something that is going to be somewhat rhythmic. So for example, if, again, I'm going to start with just a hi-hat pattern, and I'm going to, give me just 1 second. There we go. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to record 1 bar. Just like that, because that way this is always going to start at the same time. Right? Now we've got some swing on that, and what we want to start thinking about is creating something that is more melodic. But the approach is the exact same, because it's the idea about creating rhythm first. Rhythm is king. That's one thing that I got from Cage and Zane Wolf. Hey, Yoku. And that's something that is going to be incredibly beneficial to when you're trying to make music like this. And again, like, I know that I'm doing this with halftime, but I feel like halftime is actually the harder version of this because it's unquantized, right? So you're making unquantized music per se that really forces you to open your eyes about how to perceive rhythm, and really forces you to think. You have to think outside of the kick and snare if you're making this kind of genre. Yes, like the snare bangs and the kick hits or whatever, but aside from the aesthetic outside of that, it's really all about emphasizing the groove. But now that we have something like this, we can use that piece of rhythm as a guide, and we're going to modulate the bass line with a pitch. So now what I can do is a couple of different options. One thing is I can just listen to this and I can just try to create a rhythm off of this. So okay, there we go. So I'm just going to do that. But what I was trying to do was just listen to the rhythm of this and then be like, all right, what am I doing? But we've got something. We can do something kind of like that. And now that we have something, we can pretty much focus on creating different aspects of this that are going to kind of be the same. So because I have this, because we've done this, I'm actually just going to focus on this part first, because we'll talk about like the response, but we just made like a little bit of, we made a call. But from this boom, bum, 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 right? What we can focus on is making a more aggressive sound. So I usually start with just a sine wave, and then maybe we can do something like a wavetable. I'm going to try not to spend too much time on this, but I'll just quickly make something. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Okay, that'll work too. Let's just do the old school. I'm gonna grab one of these guys. I'm gonna turn this down just a little bit. I'm going to distort this guy right here with just a little bit of overdrive. And now that we have this, we can create a small Reese if we wanted to, but one that's not going to be so detuned, but one that's kind of like this. And let's go ahead and layer this just a bit with something that is really wide on top. So we'll set this to like super detune mode, and we're going to turn this down by quite a bit, but something maybe of the sort like this. I like when shit works out. So from there, we can maybe grab something that's like multi-pass, and all of this stuff that I'm showing you right now is kind of like inspired by like EEPROM and Shades and stuff, but I don't know those people personally, but just as a matter of what I'm going for. The Fat Trader is kind of like an amp, or like a, yeah, I guess like an amp distortion or something of the sort. So if you kind of just use it sparingly, you can add just a touch of chorus to this. And just a touch of like really, really small reverb. But you can start to see that we're already starting to get into that aspect of it sounding more interesting because we have a melody with this, and that's perhaps the easiest way to make something that seems interesting is, well, shit, by adding melody. And so even though we don't have anything that's really moving on this yet, the melody is carrying the interest of the tune, right? But something else that we can do if we wanted to was, now that we have something, it can follow along with the melody. And this might not work out, it might not be perfect or whatever, but again, it's just understanding and bringing back those same concepts about how to add movement to your bass. Okay, we're gonna keep that in our pocket for just a second, because what I wanna talk about right now is building the fundamental, which means that your low end needs to make sure that, like, if you have it's called, I think, like the cloakroom test or something like that, but that's where you pretty much just monitor your low end. But once you have something like that, right, and you know that your low end is good, then you can make the rest of the stuff as big or as wide as possible. You can do all those aspects of distortion. You can, you know, do things that are outside of phase plan if you wanted to, right? Like we could even frequency split this. I could add an amp, and I could go like this. We'll leave this one alone. We will high pass this, which is the same thing that we were doing in multipass, but now we just have access to more effects. So I can solo this guy. Okay, it is soloed. Bro, what are you doing? Okay, but I can solo this guy, maybe turn it down a bit, take a listen to it. Let's just grab, I don't know, this guy sounds fine. Now from that, we can add just a touch of reverb to this. Let's use a really small one. Let's use Valhalla. Valhalla is good for being a super, super small reverb. And you don't need these plugins. It's really just about understanding, like the concept, right? Okay, so now that you have something like this, you can compress everything together and do some kind of, I told myself I wasn't going to do sound design, but what do you expect? So we're hard clipping this. You can see here that that's making it there, but we're just making this super duper fat. But the thing with this is that it's a full range sound, right? Because under this, it would be a very, very simple, just like, hold on one second. Okay, I'm not gonna design a kick right now, but just for the sake of understanding like what I'm talking about, if you were to just use a regular kick and snare, it'd be pretty much kick, snare, and hat. That's it. So if we do this, it'd be and then let's just move this forward. I know that these suck, so it's okay, because again, this is just meant to be something that is conceptual as opposed to actual, like, yo, check out what I'm gonna make on stream. If you guys want to know what I make on stream, then you can just check out the masterclasses, or sorry, check out the album. Oh yeah, that's nice and loud. So we can reduce that by quite a bit. But from this, boom, 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 right? By setting this to be a little bit early, wherever this is, these drums are terrible, but you can start to create rhythm around this. And that's what you're starting to kind of come into, is being like, all right, well, how are these playing off of each other? Because like, if you notice too, like the kick and snare don't really add up. It's not really all that interesting in that matter. So whenever you are kind of doing stuff like this, perhaps it might be more wise to be like, oh, well, now I'm going to use this to follow the rhythm here. Or maybe I'll pick the hi-hat. But you can move some of this stuff a little bit late to kind of match things up in that way. And it guides where to place the rest of the drums. I will say that it's incredibly important to make sure that like your drums match the vibe. These are not halftime drums by any means. But you know, if you have something that's like a doof.
A doorbell ringing sends out similar, but...
Okay. You know, something like that of the sort. And then you have some kind of, let me see, I should have plenty of stuff in Aurora. Or we can even just use a clap, right? You know, That's what we're really looking for. You can even take off the first hi-hat hit and just have something right there. So you can do something like that of the sort, pull this back on. We don't have any side chaining that's going on right now, but that's okay. But if you were to back off the low end of this guy, this is why it's so important for you to use the right kinds of drums, because this automatically sounds 10 times better. But if you've got something like this, maybe a little bit later, something kind of like that. And again, it doesn't need to be anything that's complicated, but you're here. And I know that we're talking about modulating bass, which I'm going to get to in just a second, but you ready? So this is what you play. You've got the bum, 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 bum. And then when you're ready to modulate the bass, you add one extra element to change it up. So what you do is, hold on one second. I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to duplicate this to kind of showcase, because I don't know, that seems right now that's what's telling me that is the easiest way to do this. But you know, you start with this one. Let's go ahead and color this different. So you play this for 4 times and you go, sorry, let's turn off to where it's just the full range, you know, bum, 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 bum. You play that 4 times. Then after that, whenever you get into like your next like thing to where you're ready to move on, then you just do this. And then maybe you add in some kind of tambourine or something. Tambo. Tambo. Hold on, let me come out of that. There we go. And then we add just another piece of percussion, just like this. And let me just solo this really quick, because I'm going to create its own independent rhythm. Actually, that's fine. We can just do something like that to where it's very simple, like so. Then we can grab these two, turn this one down, so that way they actually sound like they're moving. But now, whenever we get into this part, right, the dun 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 dun. Now we've got all this space to fill everything else, because what we can do now is we can just duplicate this and take the same idea of this patch, you know, and then we can just do something very simple, kind of like this, to where we're like, all right, well now we need a fill, and or we need some kind of response, so we can just do something to where we create, you know, this is gonna take me a couple of attempts to fix, but now that we have something like that, we can actually do this a couple of times to where, hold on one second, we're going to create a kick out of this, essentially. And then what we're also going to do is add this to the master, just like this. And then we're just going to create a new rhythm that I already know what it's going to be. Boom, boom. Boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. We're am I? Oh, there we are. And then we're going to have this space open right here, which I'm going to show you in just a second. But now we can use this, even though again, it's not perfect. We're using this as modulation. We're using this as movement to create something with, to go along with this. So I'm using the same bass. I'm designing and using the same sounds. Now that we have this though, we can start to do something kind of like this to where we play off of that modulation shape. So right, and we can continue to build off of this in such ways that kind of just play along to the movement. We can do something that is, you know, something that is like reverb, right? I would probably want to throw that in multipass, but again, like this is just concept play, right? This is just understanding like this is how you can write very easily shit that's actually interesting, and this is how you can make your bass lines like work for you. That is the goal. So if I'm doing something kind of like this, then my thought process is, all right, how do I make a really fat sound? And then how do I twist that fat sound in such a way that is going to complement each other, right? So as opposed to being like, I have to design a completely new bass, I have to design a completely, you know, new thing. No, you just use the same fundamental. If it has a good sub in it, then you just change some of the effects on it and you create different aspects of movement. Right? And what you can do with this is you can even leave this open, kind of like so, to where, yeah, that's actually going to play well. And then what you do is you duplicate this track and you take this guy and you go like this. There's going to be a fill right here. We just add something that's going to be like a generator of the sort. And sure, we can use, let's use the Aurora Dragon one, but you turn the mix on just like this. And now from this, we've created our response. So take a listen. Right? Or maybe this is a little bit slow, so. You know, or we can create another melody out of this as well. And one other thing that I'm going to do on all of these is I'm just going to cut this off just a little bit to create some space. Bum, bum, bum. So once you have something like that too, right, and we have this understanding about creating, this is a martial arts concept called broken rhythm, but what you're doing is creating anticipation and expectation with this. So if you have this bass line, we're just going to take this one for now, and you duplicate this 4 times, then you are going to expect the same shit, right? So let's just even take the first 2. Now, right here is a pinnacle moment because you are expecting the same thing to happen, right? Because there's the exact same call and response. So if you were to take that and then you replace that with something that you're already familiar with, you were to replace it with, say, something like, you know, something like this, and you extend that out. Hold on one second. That's in raw. We need that to be in stretch. We've got a kick, but then we leave space right here. Bounce that out. Maybe. I don't know what happened there. Command B. There we go. and go like this. We start to get into resampling, which is the key, the most beautiful thing about this kind of music. But look, we've created a variation. So we can go here, we can create a space right here, just like this, and hit the R button. That's reverse. We can pull this hat off right here and just let that be. So just leave all of this space for interpretation. So now we've got and then we can go back to this and then create something different, like we can go like bum bum bum. Sorry, I was looking for the right moment. Right? We can create like a little space right there, and then we can have a little skip that pulls up. We can do something like that. We can change the generator if we wanted to. So we can try something different. We just go into all of these. Any one of these will pretty much work. It's really just a matter of like, does it sound cool? But you get what I'm saying, right? So, and again, I'm not trying to get into producing because I'm not really feeling whatever it is that I'm making right now. But with the aspect of creating a bass line, look, we've already done it. We've created a bass line just from nothing. And that's what you want to think about whenever you're doing stuff like this. So just make one patch and then start to add the variation to it. Start to make that relationship, because when you start with something like this, right? Now that you have these variations, this is where you can go back and substitute specific things for what is supposed to be there. So for example, we've got this now, right? Which is again, not the most interesting thing. And I'm not trying to impress you with the most interesting thing. It works, but now that we have something like this, right here, that's where we can switch this up again. We can just take this guy right here and we can just add in just a touch of, you know, pitch bend automation. And do something kind of like this. Add in another fill. And now we just created a little bit of variation in between that. We can also, if we wanted to, we can also make this unique. Go like this. And it's the same bass line though, right? But we've just got into resampling this. Let's go multipass and let's just do like a very fast, you know, like filter thing or whatever. Let me see here. Yeah, this is going to be dramatic, so that's why I'm going to use this one. But you turn on the mix, and now whenever you have this, it's right. So now look, I just found something that seemed kind of cool. So I'm going to bounce this out. I'm going to listen to how this sounds, see if I can get a similar sound. Okay, we got nothing. I'm going to try this a couple of times. It'll be worth it if we can get a good sound out of it. it might have been from, hold on 1 second. So one thing that you can also do if you don't want to keep doing this over and over again is you just go to audio 6 and go to post. And we are not talking about mixing or anything else of the sort, but you know, again, just take it for what it is. But you go here to that one. So you don't want to be too picky with this, but what you can do is you can take stuff like this and you can use this to start to create more variation from this, right? Now I don't know what pitch that is, but that's okay. But you can create another rhythmic element from this. And to find the, I guess I should show you that, but to find the pitch, you just grab an EQ or something. Parametric EQ would be best, and you look at where the most prominent frequency is. So that looks like that's in D, right? So if we were to bounce this and then transpose it by 2, wait, E sharp by 3. Then you can kind of add something like this in which to create just another piece of rhythm from this. And it might not work out. You might have to put some work into it, or you might have to like fuck with it. But again, it's just resampling shit, and it's the idea about taking something like this to what's it called? To keep moving, to keep right? So you can get into that. Gotta bounce off, gonna have to watch it later. But from thanks for coming in, man. So from this idea though, you can see that it's just a matter of playing with different pieces and elements in which to be able to create. But here's the thing. Even though this is not something that I would ever even think about releasing, it's not something that I would ever do, we wrote a beat. We wrote a beat based off of the bass line. We wrote a beat just from that same aspect of being like, oh, well, fuck, like, what do I do? Now it's just a matter of filling in the gaps. Now it's a matter of making everything more interesting, but it's taking the same idea of substitution or modulation of a simple sound and making slight changes to it. I say slight changes to it. I did make pretty dramatic changes to it, but I say like slight because I've been doing like the generative stuff for so long. But within that aspect, right now what we can do is we can continue to focus on the groove. We can continue to change this if we wanted to. So like, again, if I wanted to make this more, you know, to switch it up or something, we could duplicate this. And I hear you guys. Just give me 1 second, okay? And then I'll talk about that here in a bit. But from this, you can just switch up the pattern or switch up even the bass line. So now from here, we can, you know, switch this up into something completely different. So you can switch this into a Reese, or you know, we can do something where we turn this into maybe less. Nice. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but there's like this bump sound. So we could even do something like that. So where we add in that little thing here. Can you hear it? Yeah, nice. Maybe use a saturator. So now we can even switch this up, right? We can build anticipation for this sound right here. So instead of doing this twice, oh, that's fine. So we can leave this here to where it plays the same melody, and it's always going to be centered around the same melody, but we can duplicate this now. And with this guy, we can move this here to where it's switched up a little bit, and we can actually pull off of all of the drums except for the kick. And something that we can do with this is we can make this unique by bouncing it. We'll stretch it out kind of like so. Create a riser. Pull off of this guy, and now so we can pull off of this guy. Then we can grab some kind of schmeck and switch up the snare. Hold on one second. Let me find a snare here. And now from this, we can just leave this on the same thing, right? But whenever this drops, we can switch this, well, I guess like switch the main percussion or whatever into something a little bit different. So now we've created this switch up. But you get what I'm saying, right? So now that we have something like that, we can, you know, have that full thing. And again, like this is very like, not necessarily half-assed, but it's like just as a matter of demonstration, but like it is there. And it all kind of stems from that same idea about, you know, picking a theme or picking something to build off of. And that's where you're going to find how to make stuff like this. And honestly, this way of thinking has been because of the MPC. Because I can't really make like ear candy, or I can't make all these crazy fills and switches and stuff. I have to focus on the core sound. Making tunes like this has been really just about like, all right, I need to make a bass that is going to have enough energy to carry throughout. I need to make something, I need to make a kick and snare and a hi-hat that's going to be strong enough to, you know, to bring the energy. But once you have that, then that's where all of the elaboration can come in. That's where all of the unique stuff can come in and become more interesting. And that's what I'm hoping people take away from this masterclass. Because from whether it be, you know, a single note where, you know, you're just playing something that's rhythmic, when you think about adding movement to your basses, when you think about adding, you know, when you think about diversifying, but doing but diversifying from a simple concept, which could just be the movement aspect that we talked about before of audiating the sound, right? Of whoa. All right, well, that's what I want to start with. Whoa. Or, you know, let's say you're talking about a melody or something, right? Doom, 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 doom. I'm tone deaf, so forgive me. But from that, I can be like, all right, now I've got something to work with. I've got the rhythm. I've got the movements. Then the replacement aspect of that can become so much easier. And in that light, you know, by doing these switches and stuff and by thinking about this cognitively, now this opens up all the other doors in which to do different shit. Because once you have this set up, maybe this is your call, you can even take this stuff here that we have, just this do, right? We could duplicate this, and again, you don't have to do anything different. You could bounce this in audio if you want to. You can make a new synth if you want to. We could pitch this up by 12. And then we could do something that is a lot more simple. So maybe something that is just akin to, you know, we could even pull off of the noise. We could pull off of this. We could just do something that's like a pluck, for example. So we could, I think that's already there. Let me see. So we can do something kind of like this. And then we can just make this kind of plucky. You can add some delay. We can pull off with the distortion. And then we can just write a completely different melody. So, or we could change or keep the same melody, right? So we can go like this, dun, 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 dun. And then we can grab all of these guys, pitch these up. Not really sure why that did that, but you can create something that's more like a bell if you wanted to. That'll work too, so we can just record that. Right? There's so many options that you can do. It's just a matter of playing along with those kinds of things, and it's just a matter of replacing these sounds or these ideas from very simple concepts. But I'm telling you guys, like, the hardest part of this whole thing is rhythm. Once you have the rhythm, once you understand like how to create a relationship between two sounds or more, then all this other stuff just kind of starts to flow together. And that's the beautiful thing about this, is that it's so much more simple than I ever made it out to be. It's so much more simple than hopefully you guys have made it in the past if you've been struggling with this or anything of the sort. But like, that's all it has to be, right? We've got a beat now. Yeah, bump, bump. You know, maybe on this one you can kind of, you know, create space, and that's my thing, is like, this is kind of too close together. So, you know, I want this to actually be able to groove. So you can kind of pull back off of this. Hey, Antoine. But even though we just did this, you know, in, well, I guess in an hour, you can start to see like how this can lead up, right? You can start to see how if this was something that I actually cared about, how it could go into something that is going to be more of an interesting aspect of that. What? TLDR, there's two different ways to add movement to your bass, either by automation or by modulation. And once you have that, start with a simple concept. And it's not even about building a bass line or even about writing tunes like this. It's about just taking one simple idea and figuring out how to apply, I guess, just movement to it, right? If you're making bass music, then you need to, make stuff that's going to have an interesting bass line. It doesn't have to be anything that's complicated. You could do something as simple as an 808. You could totally come into this and be like, all right, well, maybe I just want to make a single note bass line, but I want it to be nice and fat. You could just make a triangle, grab an envelope here, kind of like so. Same thing here. Same thing here, to where we add just some kind of pitch envelope, like so, to make it have a little bit of a kick. Modulate it with itself a bit. If this was something I actually cared about, this project, grab a filter. There we go. But with this, you can still hear that even though it's an 808, it still has movement, right? Because it has a pitch envelope, and then it also has a little bit of decay within this. So even if you were to take something like this and then be like, all right, again, this is just sketching and just having fun with this idea in general, but let's say you didn't want any of this baseline shit, it's all garbage to you and blah blah blah, and you're going to restart. Well, you still have the beat, and so from doing something like this, you can now we can just pretty much do the same thing. Right? And then from this, you can color this. We could duplicate this on the next one like this and switch that up on our next, 8-bar fill or whatever. Take this off and just change this to like your neuro bass or some shit. It doesn't really matter. That's not really the point. The point is to understand like how to switch shit up and how to get stuff that works. Right? You could even do something that's just like this. But you're starting to play along with these, and you're starting to build this call and response with all of these. And that's what this is all about. If you've got something that's a melody, like, it's really easy, because then when you modulate stuff, when you think, you can modulate or automate stuff, you can focus on specific notes that are going to be changed. So this one would be a prime example, right? This is a higher note that doesn't have as much bass. So maybe on this aspect, that's where I would add in my generator. So I'd be like, I want this to do something random right here. I don't really necessarily know, but just for that little moment in time, this is going to turn the generator on. Hey, Lex. So or what we can do is we can kind of, like the possibilities are limitless, and that's kind of cliche, I understand, but it's also true of like, we could do something like that, or we could duplicate this, leave this off to where we create the expectation, right? So now we know that there's going to be a high note right there, and then we can just do this little fill right here to create space for it. So now we've created an impactful moment, right? We've done a sound design highlight, so we can just leave the kick off. So, now we're playing off of this call and response. How are you, Lex? Right? So you've created that cool and interesting moment there, that cool and interesting fill that you can like substitute within that to create stuff. I think where most people get caught up is they try to, I think where most people get caught up is they try to do shit like this. And this is why I would not recommend it. But most of the time, people start their tunes like this. They go, all right, 85 BPM. I'm going to turn this off so that way everything is in time. But they do this. And then they go, I kid you not. And I know this because I was one of those people. Stop it. This one, no. You have to tell yourself, no. This is the most boring fucking way to make a tune ever. Don't do this shit. Even if it's something like this, oh my God, man. And then like dude, no, just don't do it like that. Pull this off. Amazing. That like your timing of your name is incredible. Pull the kick snare off. Focus on this. Instead of just going, modulate the bass. If you're making bass music, two things. Either start with the percussion, my opinion, this is an opinion, but start with the percussion or start by adding movement to your bass. So again, what is the best way to do that? There is no really like best way, so to speak. But if you have something to at least kind of start creating a rhythm with, maybe you go like this. Do. And you set this to 0 when you go like this. Bring that up to 100. Well, at least now I've got something to work with, right? Maybe, it could be something like this, but okay. Well, now maybe I could do something like this and see, like, this leads to more decisions. This leads to stuff that's actually interesting. And go plus 12. I'm just going to right click and go plus 12. I'm smart enough to think that's called envelope, but not sure. This is an LFO. Or I guess like with the LFO, you can call it a multi-stage envelope. But now what we can do with this is we can actually turn the phase off just a little bit, so that way it starts a little bit late. And so now it should be here, sorry. Now we've modulated something. Now we've actually created movement, and it's just with the volume. But even still, it has movement now. We've added that. We've added some kind of interest to this. And all you have to do from here is build off of that movement to make that more interesting. So it's not about like, how do I create the monster sounds? It's not about how do I create, and that's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give you. It's not about how do I create, you know, the most like crazy fucking neuro sound. It's about how do I make something that's going to sound interesting while having good low end, which for this in particular, because the detuning is so small, you can still use this as a sub, or you could just as easily replace this. So you could do something kind of like this to where you've got this filter. Then we can drag this over here. Actually, no, I'll just do it like this. You can pull this off, do that here to where we just have the sub. But now on this one, we've pulled this away, and then we could detune the fuck out of this. So now we've got a high layer, and now we've got a low layer. If you're really worried about like the sub. But how much more inspiring is that than what we were doing from before? Right? So now, again, we think about rhythm. We think about rhythm, 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 right? So now we've got this little guy here. I think I wanted this to be twice as long. Right? Now once you have this, that's where you can bring this stuff back in. That's where shit's going to become more interesting. Let me grab one of those claps. And again, we're not doing any side chaining or anything, but I'm just trying to like just drill this into your head. Just drill this into your face of like how we overcomplicate this stuff. Rhythm is everything. Rhythm is everything. Sorry, that's a little bit off. Boom, cut, boom, cut. There we go. I just little things like that, then you just make it a little bit more interesting, right? You can do like a dual delay or something. Right? So, I mean, like, I started several different like kinds of beats today, just to kind of give you an example, but that's really like all it takes. That's really all it takes is rhythm, and then understanding how to add movement or rhythm to your bass. It doesn't matter what genre this is, as far as like electronics. No, it doesn't matter what the genre is, anyways, right? You can modulate through pitch, you can modulate through effects, you can modulate through volume, or dynamics, I think would be a better way to say that. But modulating the bass, practicing that as an aspect is so much more important than how do I make a neuro bass? How do I make a, thanks, how do I make a, you know what I mean? Like, how do I make this like specific kind of thing? That's where all of this stuff is going to come alive for you. And that's what I wanted to give you within today's masterclass. So within that, hopefully that was helpful. If you guys kind of want to see examples about like how I've done that, I mean, you could just listen to my music, right? So modulation through, this is an 808, so modulation through pitch in the 808. Different bass, different fills, right? Same thing. If you're looking at the more simple thing like we did at the beginning of this, which was something like Doppelgangster, like it's the same melody, but just listen to how it changes over time. The intro is even the same shit. But you see even right there, like I changed the bass, same riff, right? Same riff, everything else of the sort, just modulate it, add a little bit of change up to it, right? Same thing here, different bass. Right? Different song. This one modulating the bass. We do a combination of like something that's just like a on this one. Make sense? Hopefully. My album drops November 9th. You can listen to it right now on alckemy.com, or you can buy it. But hopefully that was something that was helpful to you all. Hopefully that was something that kind of gave you the perspective. And this is an invitation to really just honestly check out everything that I have to offer as an artist. So whether it be my album, whether it be my master classes, or you can get Every single sound that I've used in this album is from pretty much from the presets that I make, like Eternum 4. I use some Eternum 3, and then I'm working on Eternum 5, but I'm going to wait a little bit to put that out, so that's all on my website. But yeah, that's what this masterclass was about, to just be like, all right, guys, here it is. This is how you approach bass lines. This is how you like come into it cognitively and make shit that is going to work with each other and make things that you're actually going to be happier with. Because even if you are a beginner sound designer, even if you use presets or whatever, focus on the core aspect, which has nothing to do with mixing other than making sure that you have a good sub, a good low end, right? A good fundamental. This is what is going to help you figure out how to make, like, well, honestly, bass music, right? And whenever you listen to people like Cohen Sound, whenever you listen to people like Noise It and all that other stuff, what I just showed you is the same techniques that they use. It's just a matter about how they approach it. It's just a matter about like what special sound design tricks they have. And that's what makes them incredible, but it's still the same thing. They use the same plugins, they use the same DAWs, right? It's the same shit. So when you get that, when you have that aspect of that, take that concept and start here. One sound, right? One sound, and create rhythm with that. Don't be so focused on the timbre of things. Don't be so focused on, I think that's the best way to say it, is don't be so focused on the timbre. Focus on creating the rhythm, focus on creating the movement. That is what is ultimately going to help you become successful at making better beats or better bass lines or better compositions, I guess, right? Because even for me, like, I have music on here that's not even a beat. Like, I have stuff that's just like fucking completely like completely out of time, just texture. But what purpose is it supposed to serve? What is it that you're trying to get out of it? What are you trying to accomplish, right? If you're just trying to sound like somebody else, then you don't have an identity, which is okay when you're first starting. But instead of being like, well, I want to make music like these people, don't focus on the sound design aspect. Like, you can use that. That can be like a big goal. Like, that can be the long-term goal. But like, if I can tell you anything about like being where I am at today, it's not really the sound design that got me to this aspect. It was some key pieces of information and understanding the essence about what it was that I wanted to create, in which to get into, like the stuff that I wanted to do. As long as like you understand the fundamentals about like what makes good sound design anyways, like what makes a good kick, what makes a good snare. It's not about having the best of that aspect. It's about having something that, like, has the proper fundamentals, the proper characteristics about what defines that. Once you understand the structure, then you can break it, of course. But when it comes to making crazy sounds and this and that, it still comes back to the same thing, which, Cage, if you're watching this, Zane, if you're watching this, thank you guys. Your fundamental needs to be, you got to have a good fundamental. And the easiest way to have a good fundamental is to just use a sine wave. So whatever it is that you make that's all crazy and shit, put a sine wave under it. Well, no. By yeah. No, we're saying, I agree. Sorry, too many thoughts. So at this point in time, like, I'm pretty much done with the demonstration. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer that. I know that people were talking about pads from before, so I'm sorry for not necessarily ignoring you, but like moving that stuff to the side. It's not that I didn't want to answer it. It was just that I was trying to focus on the masterclass. But let me catch up with some of these comments now, and I'll kind of take a look through that. Nice. Always tend to start from zero every time I want to change the sound, but I like the mindset. Got to practice it. If you get a different sound each time, they'll lack consistency and context. Maybe. It depends. Depends on what fundamental you start with. Creating call and responses from familiarity of the bass concept for the track. Only like separate verses from the choruses, but I like practice on movement and stuff like Alckemy is showing. My problem is creating pads and background elements that complement the bass lines. Lead synth complementing. So great job in this video. Honestly, no worries. Keep it up. You're doing a good job. Oh, thanks. Disconnected. I don't know if you're still here or not, but I'll touch on that. That's an easy one. I figured adding a convolver at the end of my chain perhaps is something in glitch machines. done stuff on pads, but you guys shouldn't overthink about the background elements as they're supposed to fill the spectrum but not overtake elements. I agree with that, but it depends. You can create a call and response from that too though, right? So this is exactly like, sorry for the self-plug, but this is exactly why I do this shit, which I'm going to self-plug, but background elements, pad elements, right? There's a couple of things that you can do. If you're trying to do stuff that's musical, then you can just create pads, right? Or create slow moving elements. But this was something that Frequent talked to me about way back in 2019. And he was like, you need to understand the difference between foreground elements and background elements. And so when you have something like that, let's say you're using this as a bass, right? Well, this would actually be considered a background element. That's not the bass, but this thing, right? That needs to be up front. That needs to be loud as shit. Your drums need to be loud as shit. The background stuff is really just meant to like create filler things. But when you create filler things within this kind of music, it needs to be in the right time, because if you just have pads that are going on, you lose the sense of space, and that pulls away from the groove. I'm going to say that again. When you have stuff that fills the space, whether it be through harmony or whatever, or texture or time is the most important. But when you have stuff that fills out too much time, you've got a wall of sound, it pulls away from the groove. So when you have stuff like this, when you think about these pads and all that, especially with this kind of music, you either want to do something that's going to add to the groove, or you want to do something that's not going to get in the way. So for example, if I wanted to, maybe like this is a bit much, right? So listening to this, then what I can do is I can go Command B. Actually, I'll go J, because we might want to make changes to this or whatever, but I can highlight all of this stuff. We're going to bounce this to a new track. And what I can do with this is, instead of having this guy here, let me just turn that off, right? I can focus on doing a couple of things. And this is why it's so important to work with audio, because if you look at all this stuff, like you can see that like as a time perspective, there's constant noises that are moving through this, like throughout this little piece of time. Sorry, that was a really terrible way to explain that. But what I mean is that it bleeds, everything overlaps, right? So what happens when you think about creating space like this, right? Or whenever you want to create something that's kind of pad-like, you can kind of reverse this. And you can start to play along with this rhythmically. And fade that off and give it some space. And maybe here or maybe you just do one small riff, just like this. Something that is very, very subtle, but in the background, right? Something that's not going to pull away from the main thing. And a lot of times where you use pads like this and stuff is over, like maybe if you're doing something that's more focused on music and stuff, like something that has a lot of melody focused in on this, then you want to do things that are going to be like on the downbeat or something, right? And then maybe like just in one space, you see how there's a space right here? Hey, Acolyte. There's a space right here to fill it up. Right? So it's a much more subtle approach behind that. It's not really pulling anything away. It's just in the background, just a little bit. Because when you start to make things really upfront in that manner, you're taking away from the most important pieces of this. But for me personally, I don't really do stuff like this anymore, unless if it's going to be something that's very different or a different style of genre. And the reason why is because, like, again, looking at like Doppelgangster and stuff, like, that has space in it. That actually has reverb on the top end. That actually is filling up everything. So that way it doesn't have to have more elements in the background. Or, you know, if you want to focus on something that is going to, how do you say, like, if you want to have a pad that's going to be more important or have more involvement within this, then what you can do is you can pull back on the bass and they can take turns. And that goes into the same aspect of, what's it called? That goes into the same aspect of like creating variation in call and response. You hear this in hip hop all the time where like it's the full sample or whatever, and then they pull a low pass filter on it and then just let the beat play, right? That's the kind of stuff that you can think about, and that's why it's really important to study hip hop. But let's just say like you pull everything on the low end and then you bring this back. Now this can be this can be like a, you know, this can come up more to the front because we've pulled away from the frequencies that this is overtaking. So now listen. Now you can play between those, right? You know, or, you know, just again, make those changes, you know, make it different, right? You could duplicate this, delete all of this except for this guy. You can pull off of the movement on all of these. Maybe. Bro, what the fuck? Oh, I was like, what? And now that you have something like that, you can just leave this here. And now that you have something like that, you know, it's going to be different every time, but you can always just balance this out. But that's what I was talking about before. So now we've got an extra call and a response. Sorry. You know, then once you have that, you can start to get into those ideas about, you know, being like, oh, I hear something right here. So you can do like a triplet thing. Hold on one second. You know, something along the sort where you go like this, just find where that little piece is like this and go pop, pop, pop. Right? I've never used it. I'm in a DAW holding pattern. Need to mess around with external stuff. Wait, what? I just got to get into a DAW. Are you like completely hardware based? But you see, like, now we've got a variation, and now from that same idea, from that same just very simple concept of boom, 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 right, which is a complete bite off of Eunice. But in that aspect, you can see that, like, it's just mindset. All this stuff is mindset. Does anybody have any questions about anything, by the way? Yeah, what is your opinion on the Anna 2 synth? I've never used it before, so I can't really give you an opinion. There you go. That's all it has to be. It's all it has to be. And from that, once you understand like the mechanics about how all that stuff works, it's just owning it. Own the baseline. That's the best advice I can give you, is like, especially like if you're kind of in the beginning stages, you're gonna be like, this stinks, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But like, as long as it has a sub, own the baseline and elaborate on the baseline. And the more time that you spend on elaborating the baseline, but you start from something that's very simple, the easier it's going to get for you to start to make like crazy fucking sounds. Because if you're just going for crazy fucking sounds right off the get-go, then what's going to end up happening is you're not going to know how to use any of this shit, which is exactly what happened to me. I was like, this bass, I got to figure out how to make this bass. Maybe if I just have this bass and I can make some cool shit with it, blah, blah, blah. It's like, nope. Nope. Doesn't work like that. What does work is when you take a concept that's already musical or rhythmic, and then you focus on making that shit cool because it's already in context. When you have the context, it's so much easier for you to make something that sounds cool that's already in that aspect of context. Somebody please clip that. But otherwise, if you're just doing bass design that's like random shit, and then you're trying to force that into nothing, or you're trying to force that into something that's supposed to be what it is. And then you're like, whoa, shit, like my problem is I can make a cool sound, but I don't know how to fit it. And that's because you don't have the practice of contextualizing. But when you focus on creating context first, and then you say, okay, now this would be the perfect opportunity for when something cool could go here, and then you experiment on the sound design from there, that's going to take you, in my opinion, so much further than if you were to just make a cool fucking bass and then be like, oh, now I'm going to make a bass line with this. Because that's what we all did, or do, or whatever. I did that for fucking years. I was like, I'm just going to make a cool bass, and then it's going to do this, and then it's going to do that. And that's why, like, whenever I use Eternum, or whenever I make patches like Eternum, right? And then, again, I'm sorry, but all this stuff is available on my website. Hopefully a small advertisement doesn't bother you. But whenever I make stuff like this, it covers all of that aspect. So if I were to just do something like this, right? This already is big. It's fat enough to stand on its own. Then we can get into using the filter stuff. That's where all that stuff that I was just telling you about can come into play. You know, you can do your pitch bends and blah, blah, blah. If you need fill effects, you can use the generator. Right? If you need movement or you're trying to create a rhythm with it, it's got a rhythmic maker. If you need an impact, it'll make that for you too. So these bases are designed to solve all of these problems, because what they do is they allow you to start from a simple idea and then elaborate in a single patch on all this stuff. And that is how I've used these now. That's how I've begun to understand how to make these work. And from this, the reason why I believe in this shit so much is, one, nobody's fucking done this. I'm the first person to do shit like this and put it up for sale. there's that. I'm not saying that I reinvented the wheel, but I'm just saying like nobody's made anything like Eternum. And that's because the technology wasn't even as accessible, that all of this is within one patch, right? It was very difficult. It is very CPU heavy, but there's that. But in having that, in understanding this, these patches can make everything with minimal resampling, with minimal processing outside of this. How I would process a bass like this is very simple. I would use like a little bit of, I've got this preset here that I use, which is just controlling the low mids, because that's where like all the crazy shit can happen. And then I saturate it, make sure that it's a little bit more quiet than my bass. Just turn, if you're driving it by 3 dB, you turn it down by 3 dB. So this is always going to hit at -3. Right? But once you have stuff like that, this gives you all the tools that you need in which to make music like this. And all you need is one patch. And if you are familiar with resampling, if you're familiar with all of these concepts that I just taught today, then this becomes so much more valuable because it takes the sound design labor out of it. And it's not even about like making cool stuff or whatever. It's just about understanding like I can make something simple. I can make some simple melody or whatever. And then when I need to make that change, I can add to it, or I can replace some of the sounds, or I can use automation, or I can use the modulation that's built into this kind of stuff. Hopefully that's like starting to make sense, because yeah, like, and this isn't the only way, of course, right? And that there needs to be room for that. And granted, like, I'm only so good at sound design, and maybe these sounds aren't necessarily, you know, your cup of tea. Maybe they're not like crispy enough or whatever, and that's fine. But the concept about how to do this stuff, the concept about how to modulate bass, how to add movement, that's what I want you to take away from this. I don't want you to take this away from it. I want you to say, okay, what is Alckemy talking about? And now, sorry to speak in third person, but just in general, what am I talking about? And how can I apply this with the sound design that I already have? How can I apply this aspect of movement on a more simple level? Your homework is go listen to Sleaze from Shades and listen to how simple the bass line is. The bass sounds really full. The sound quality is immaculate, but it's very simple. Very simple. And you know what? That shit hits. The boom, 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 boom. It's super fucking simple though. It's just a kick, a hi-hat, a snare, or like a 808 rim shot and a clap together, and it's just boom, clap, clap, clap. It's the rhythm though. Yeah, it's the one with Ivy Lab. And that's all it is. And when you hear it and you hear that switch up, whatever, it's the same fucking riff, but they just switch the bass line, and then they add something that is the exact same, like they add something that's the exact same melody, but has a little bit of a different rhythm. And that's it, guys. And that's what the MPC taught me. So like I've done a bunch of performances and stuff, and even though I'm not the best finger drummer or whatever, like it's saying, hey, how do I focus on making these core elements, like minus all of the ear candy and blah, blah, blah. How do I focus on the core elements sounding bigger, because less is more? And when you really focus on the less is more aspect of things, that's where this music becomes alive to me. It's not about having fucking 50 million tracks. It's about having like at the most half of that, like like 50 tracks at the most. But I think post-resurrection shower, I want to say, we don't need to say this, I don't really care about this, but I think post-resurrection shower is like 30 tracks. It's the melody loop maker. Yeah, the other day I couldn't find this, but this is one of the tunes off my recent album. I believe that like outside of the groups and stuff, this tune is, what's going on here? What is this? Big swing bounce. Okay, that's fine. So this tune is like 30 tracks. It's super tiny compared to like, you know, but 1, 2, 3, 4, we're not counting the group tracks, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Okay, 21 pretty much. And there's stuff on here that's completely empty. They're just like resampling tracks, right? But while this is playing, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. This is 9 tracks. What's up, dude? 9 tracks. So, not total, but just while it's playing during the main section. So there is that aspect of less is more. Yes, you could say that I'm cheating because in the sound design process I've done, like mid-side stuff and blah 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 or whatever. But when everything is pushed and shoved back to just audio, is 9 tracks. That's all you need. And I'm not saying that, and again, please don't get me wrong. I'm really not trying to say like that I'm an amazing producer or anything of the sort, but I do think that there is a matter of cohesion, and this is stuff that I'm happy with. And I do think that the tune sounds full. So it doesn't have to have a bunch of shit. Your brain can only pay attention to so much at once anyways. So when you start thinking about that, and like, granted, there are also different sounds on here or whatever, but they're the same, like they're different sounds, but they're from the same source, if that makes sense. So like this would be like a resample of like a bunch of other shit that's just all fit into one track, but it doesn't matter. 9 tracks, right? That's more than enough. And so if you take that and you think about that and you're like, oh, well, what do those tracks consist of? We've got our kick and snare, which are 2 tracks respectively. You have your bass. I think there's like 2 bass layers. Yeah, so there's this bass layer and then there's this bass layer, which is, this one is our call. So bum, bum. And then this one is a little bit different with just an octave. And then we've got a third one here that is like our bass fills to do like random shit. Right? But that's it. And then we've got some bounced out stuff that's just texture. So 6 tracks out of the 9 are just like different variations of bass. And then the rest of the stuff, 3 tracks pretty much, is, maybe I miscounted one, 10 tracks at the most, but the other 4 tracks are just percussion. So right? But once you have drums that are full, once you have bass that's full, once you have like, really that's all you really need. But once you have all that stuff together, then there is one melodic piece in this entire thing, which is just this. Melody, bass, percussion, kick, snare. Melody, bass, percussion, kick, snare. Everything has a very specific purpose, but everything is as big as possible, because that way I don't have to focus on doing crazy, insane layering, which you could, that's always there. You could do shit like that, but you don't have to. So focus on making your basses bigger. Focus on adding movement to very simple sounds. This is a very simple bass. There's not you know, there's that same processing I was talking about with a little bit of track delay. Oh, it's Aurora Dragon. Okay, so there's this, but what's actually happening on this? You can't hear all the shit that's going on anyways. It just sounds like a low pass saw wave. So, you know, if you were to like just do, I don't remember what track this is, but you know what I mean? If you were to do something hella fucking simple like this. And you just focus on making this fat as hell. Maybe take out some of the low mids. The second harmonic is usually a good choice. So this is usually what collides with the fundamental the most. So if you take that out, then you get something like that. Then you just make this shit loud. It's not that big of a difference. Like, there's a couple of things in here that, like, you know, make it a little bit growly, but can you really tell that? Like, when it's playing, like, full force? Nobody cares. If you really want to make it move, then you can just, again, add very, very simple movement. Okay, now that's even closer now. So check this out. Right? Like, it's so similar. If you need a little bit of space on top, it needs to be a little bit more, you know, needs to be a little bit crispy. You just add some of this. So now we've got the noise that's on top. It's so similar. So you don't have to like make really fucking crazy shit. You just need to make sure that your sub is good. That's it. The thing when everyone thinks less is more is quite really huge, or when a non-producer listens, they can't tell the difference. Exactly. They're not going to be able to tell the difference. Like, my thing is, like, I make music for sound designers because I am a sound designer. Like, and I would love to say that I'm like a musician. I would love to say that, you know, like, that's what I am as an artist. But the truth of the matter is that I spent all my time cultivating sound design. And now in that aspect, I'm just stepping into like getting better at production. But from talking about these core values or talking about these core things in general, like, please don't quote Bruce Lee. But yeah, but from that aspect, that, like, that's it. Why? So I don't know if you know this, but I'm actually an instructor in Jeet Kune Do. I've been doing it I've been doing martial arts for over 15 years, but I've been taking JKD for like over a decade. And yeah, it's just, oh God, it's just a personal thing. Let's just say that. Next person that says be like water, my friend, I'm just like, oh my God, dude, it drives me crazy. Anyways, simple things, right? Simplicity. I guess if you want to borrow on Bruce Lee, always think hit. Simplicity, efficiency. There's this concept called longest available weapon to the nearest available target. But what's more important than that is keep it simple. It doesn't have to be anything complicated. But when you start from simple in order to make things complex, you take two simple things and you put it together. So once you have something like that, then that becomes simple, and you take two complex things and you put it together. It's the same way as how I teach my neuro-based stuff, of like taking simple concepts, simple aspects of movement, and then you build on top of that. But it all stems around the same theory. I think that I've kind of like, I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but within those aspects, like that's all it has to be. Modulation and automation is how you create movement within your bass, or detuning. I guess like there's other things that will do that for you, like effects as well, but for the most part, those are the keys that give you that. But start with simple ideas. Start with simple, if you're going to make a one note bass line, then add rhythm to it. If you're going to make, something that has melody, then, make a couple of different versions of it and then replace certain aspects so it seems like you have more variation on your melody, right? And that's exactly what I've been doing on the MPC. I have this melody that I'll record, and then I'll do some filter movement, and then I'll bounce that. And then what I'll do is I'll just keep the same MIDI, and I'll redo some of the automation and then add some pitch bends to it. So now I've got version A, and then I've got version B. So while the melody is playing, right, I'm getting ready, I fire up the next loop. So boom, 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 boom. Then on the next 8-bar loop, it goes do 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 do, but it keeps the same feel, but adds that variation and adds that awesome sense of like, oh man, how did they do that? But really, it's the same shit. I mean, everything is simpler than we think. Like when you see inside of the projects of your favorite artists, sometimes if you look inside of the artists of some people, like Disprove, oh man, he's got this video on Sample Genie on how to like make drums and stuff, and like that shit is fucking complicated. There are some project files that are, there are some projects that are simple. I absolutely agree with that, but some people are like just insane. That's how my projects used to look. So like this IED from way back in 2018, I do want to talk about this. So IED from 2018, this was part of the first EP that I released. This has like almost 200 tracks in it, I think. Yeah, so that tune has like, I think almost like 200 tracks in it, and it was fucking ridiculous and way overkill and way less. Like, I didn't need that much, for sure. If we fast forward to something that's kind of similar, a similar kind of tune, like that's coming on the album, Gray Fox, it's another kind of like IDM type tune, but this has like maybe a third of the tracks. And look, and listen to how much bigger it is. Hey Orsky, how's it going? But let me finish this thought and then I'll answer that question. But as you can see, like, at least in my opinion, it's way more full, it's way more clear, it's way easier to follow, and it has more energy. The bass hits harder, the relationship between everything hits harder. Now granted, like that, like this is today versus 4 years ago, but this is the learning process that I'm trying to describe. This is what I've learned over time. This is how I've figured out how to do less is more, is you focus more on the core elements. And when you do that, your kick, snare, bass, if there's a melody, then there's that, and percussion, at least as far as my genres are concerned, that's where everything becomes, that's where stuff really starts to come alive, I think is the best way to describe that. Hey Stefano, how's it going? So Phase Plant has a very similar workflow to Serum, but the thing is that it has unlimited effects, and not necessarily unlimited generators, but like what, like 32, 16, 32, doesn't matter at that point. but it also has all of these built-in modulators as well, like randomization. You've got envelopes, you've got multi-stage envelopes via LFO, you've got curves, and everything is modular. So you can automate just about anything within the tune, or like anything within this. Sorry, modulate just about anything within this. So what you end up getting is Serum, but like on crack. So that's part of the reason why I make everything within Faceplant, because it could do everything. But as I was describing from before, like Serum could never do anything close to this without external processing. Nowhere close. Nowhere close. Nothing except for like Bitwig can really do anything like this. Yeah, it's basically a giant modular rack. So if anybody's interested in this stuff, you can get these presets at alckemy.com. You can also listen to my album there, because it's coming out on the 9th, but it's already up. So if you just want to listen to it or whatever, then you can do that. I'll have a video up on YouTube. That's the whole album. I'm trying to think if I want to do something that's visual or not, or if I just want to like just upload the picture, which was the album art was half-assed anyways. But yeah, you can go check that out if anybody's interested, or you can grab a lot of these presets. We're on Eternum. I'm working on Eternum 5 right now, so I've already got a bunch of stuff, but I've released Eternum 4, and yeah, you can use all the same stuff that I was talking about within this within this project and all that. But yeah, does anybody have any other questions about today's masterclass? If you want to know more, or you want to actually learn how to make these basses, then you can become an Arcanum member. Today's masterclass was supposed to be free because I wanted to just give you an introduction about how all this stuff works. I have a halftime course that's already done, pretty much. It just teaches you the mechanics about how this stuff is and goes further into detail about rhythm. We go into about making bass lines. We go into how to make the drums for it. We go into, just me writing and talking about how to finish music. So there's a bunch of shit on there that's already available, and you have access to it all. But I guess as far as the teaching sense, I've coming back to teaching just a little bit because I just finished an album, and I'm like, I don't really want to write anything just yet. I'm excited to get back into it, but I'm kind of just revisiting some of my core fundamentals, some of my things that like make my music what it is. And I think that this stuff is important to teach as well, because fuck man, like I struggled with this so hard. This was such a big struggle for me, such a big struggle. And now that I kind of have a little bit easier of a perspective, it's a lot easier for me to not only like perform, I guess, like on stream or something, but it's a lot easier for me to convey how to make work. So there's that. Yeah, but I mean, aside from that, thank you for the knowledge. It's all well. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. I'm not rewriting the wheel. I'm just explaining things in a way that would make sense to me. When I think about an idea as layers, it seems easier to make, in my opinion. What do you think? I would say you just gotta go watch. You just gotta go watch the masterclass from the beginning, because I cover all that stuff. You came super late, but today's video, or today's live stream, was about taking a simple concept and figuring out how to elaborate on the concept, about how to find variations from one specific thing, and about how to use that approach as opposed to having to make like insane amounts of like sound design stuff. So the TLDR version of this is it's concept first, then if you're trying to write music, then it's context first, and then you can create your variations, then you can create stuff from that. You can experiment from the context because you already know what it's supposed to be. But when you just do sound design and you're like, oh, I made a cool bass, but I don't know what to do with it, then it's very difficult for you to see how the context can, or like it's very difficult for you to see how to contextualize what you just made. Does that make sense? So focus on writing, focus on just making beats, focus on actually just like writing stuff with sine waves. Then once you have that, you can make little notes to yourself. You know, if all you know is how to make a sine wave, and then you're like, oh, there's supposed to be this little thing, then you could be like, this is supposed to be something sick, and then you just replace it. So as opposed to this just being a sine wave, then you're like, there's supposed to be some kind of sick sound in there. I don't even know what it's supposed to like sound like or whatever, but you know that you replace it because it's about placement. So, and hopefully by the end of today, people have, you know, gotten to understand like the concept of placement and how to understand like the approaches to rhythm and all that stuff in general. But all the things that I talked about is pretty much how not every bass line is written, but like a large majority of it. I'm trying to think if there's anything that I missed. I try to keep it relatively general to like, okay, if you're writing dubstep, then you write a dubstep rhythm. If you're writing, you know, did I just say rhythm? If you're writing something that's like neurobass or whatever, right? It's about the rhythm, and that's the rhythm is the movement. So these terms are interchangeable, but it's about the movement of the bass. You know, if you're doing something that's like a roller DMB tune, you don't really, unless if you're doing like liquid DMB or something, but what constitutes a roller is a rolling bass line. So you need to add movement to your bass line, even if it's just a sine wave, you know, whoa, 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 whoa. That's really fucking easy when you think about it like that. You just, you know, grab an LFO, or you just do it in automation, or you just, you know, have it set to where you just go dun, 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 dun. And then when the drums come after that, right? So let's say that's what you got. You got. Then you're like, oh shit, it makes sense. It's starting to come together. Dun, 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 dun. You know, you're doing halftime. You know, you start thinking about these drum grooves, and that's why beatboxing is so important. But you're like, oh man, I really want to make something that's like dirty, you know, and just like super swung. So you're like, and then you're like, yo, like, what sounds good right there? You know, what would I add to that? And then you start thinking of like, and you're like, oh, okay, well now I just need to write that. So you write the rhythm. Even if you don't have the sounds, right? You use a fucking shitty 808 kit and you place that, but you practice that. And then you know that like there's supposed to be that movement on the downbeat, the poof. And so that's where you start to put this stuff together. Well, I've like, yes and no. I do believe that like, I do enjoy my taste in music. So I'll say that, right? But who's to say what music is good and what music is bad? Oh, no. My ears are terrible. I have like relative pitch kind of, but no, I wouldn't say that I'm good at detecting like what note is what by any means. But when it comes to like rhythm, when it comes to like understanding, I guess like notes, or not notes, but when it comes to understanding like bass lines in general, it's very easy for me to think about it up here. It's very difficult for me to do it right here, but that's because there was this disconnect of what it was that I was going for. And what I was trying to describe from before was that I was going for the timbre of the sound. I was going for the neuro bass. I was going for just the thing, as opposed to, you know, figuring out how to just write the fucking tune in its own right. So once you have that, once you understand the rhythm, then the replacement aspect of that, especially in this day and age, like it's so much easier to get the cool sounds and all that. Like I have it for sale. Other people have neuro basses and cool shit for sale. You know, you can pretty much like just go on Splice if you really want to, and like just find a cool sound and then just replace it. It doesn't have to be like, you don't have to do your own sound design anymore. I love sound design. I love making my own shit to use in my own tunes. I don't actually love sound design, if that makes sense. But yeah, who's to say, like, nobody's going to know, you know, nobody's going to know. And if you do have a little bit of sound design, then you can just change the patch. You can just change specific things or add your own movement to it. Nobody's going to fucking know. So just do that. Like, I don't want to say that sound design is irrelevant, because it's always going to be relevant as far as mixing exists. As long as mixing exists, sound design will be relevant because mixing is sound design. Feel free to disagree. That's what I think. But in that aspect, every kind of sound that you want access to is available somewhere for purchase. Am I going to recognize my own sounds? No, I don't, because people have sent me music. Well, it depends. If you don't do anything to it, then maybe. But people have sent me music and they're like, "Yo, I used your patches." And I'm like, "Really? That sounds great. Why like not even my own patches sound like that." Like if I use it in my own context. So, a great point, like a great aspect of that was I always send all my stuff to the Whittler. I don't know if you know who that is or not, but Jan has been like such a it's weird because he doesn't have a direct influence on my music, but he's always been somebody that has been supportive of me as far as my creativity. And that's why I always send him my stuff. But he sent me a demo one time and he was like, "Yeah, man, I used your patches and all that." And it wasn't like anything like neuro or whatever, it wasn't like a neuro genre. It was like his dub stuff. And I was like blown away because it sounded like something completely different. And the fact that all this stuff is randomized as well, that means that it keeps it unique. And that's why I did that way. That way it's not trap snare 7, like, or Prada snare or whatever. Like all this stuff is randomized, so you're never going to be able to like get the same thing twice. Even if I were to play this again, it's going to be a little bit different. See what I mean? But because they all kind of have like a characteristic, right, cashmere bass C69, like that's always going to be the same. But because this always hits a little bit different, because it's a little bit randomized, it might have like the same characteristic, it might have the same attributes, but it's always going to be, it's always different. Yeah, there's too much variation to be able to tell. And that was a byproduct. I didn't do that on purpose. But once I started coming out with the Eternum presets and all that with the randomization and stuff, I was like, oh, that makes all of this unique. Because even if, person A uses the same funnel ghost bass or whatever versus person B, they're never going to get the same shit. So it's like, great. That means that, this sound is going to be implemented. It's going to be contextualized. It has to be used in a different way than your normal approach. So it's like, it's semi-generative, right? Same characteristics, same timbre or whatever, but the movement is always going to be slightly different. And I love that about these patches. I love the Eternum series, and I can't say enough good things about them. And I'm not saying that because I made it. To be truthful, most of the things I make, I'm like, I fucking hate this. But this was one contribution to the music world or the music community that I'm like, this is the one. This is something that I think is really special. And I hope that you guys find it special as well, especially if you've already purchased it. It's fucking dope. And it's hopefully only going to keep getting better. But yeah, with that, guys, I don't really have anything else that I want to cover. We pretty much did the whole masterclass. We had a couple chats. I was just kind of geeking out on bass design and all that. Does anybody else have anything that you all want to discuss? Or does anybody have any questions regarding bass lines or anything of the sort? Mostly fellow producers lift their fingers when they recognize a sound and think unoriginal. It's only when casual listeners start hearing it, start talking about it, a change might be a good idea. Good achievement when you are satisfied with your stuff. Thank you. Yeah, I'm pretty proud of this thing, this monster I've created. Right. Yeah, and with that aspect, people that listen on a casual level aren't really going to recognize that stuff. But even if, you know what I mean? There's also a matter of renaissancing something. So for example, like synthwave made a comeback. Sampling has always been a thing. So why can't we sample old stuff too from old electronic genres, right? Why couldn't I sample Burial and be like, yo, that's so fucking sick. I'm going to sample that and use that and like own it as a matter of like, you know what I mean? Like in the same way of hip hop or something, or if there is a Prada snare, maybe there's another way that you could use that unoriginal thing in an original way or in a creative way. So you get what I'm saying? It's like there are no rules. It's important to understand a structure of something, but there are no rules to things. It's just a matter of whether or not you could pull it off. I haven't looked back since I found your channel. You're my go-to for sound design teachings for sure. Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And I hope that, I hope that I continue to cover stuff that you're interested in. Because I know that I've kind of ventured off and started to do different stuff like within the MPC and all that. My question from before was if sidechaining is a necessity. I tend to use it stylistically and use multiband compression dynamic EQ for mixing. No, it could be. It just depends on the aesthetic that you're going for, right? There's a Culprit Masterclass that's free on YouTube. You just type in Culprit Masterclass and he actually discusses the same topic, which I would defer to him because he's Culprit. But he talks about specific things of like how sidechaining is not always necessary. Can I send you a faceplant preset? It's heavily inspired by your sound design and I would love some pointers on what to improve. You can send it to me off stream. I used to do this thing where it was called like Pimp My Preset. And that was something that I did a lot, but people stopped sending me shit. So I stopped doing that. I mean, think about how many songs have piano sound in them or guitar. Right. Or a kick and snare, right? A Yamaha drum kit, a Pearl drum kit, a Black Oyster drum kit, something, or like instruments back in the day were not unique. It was just how you played them. And I think that with the world of sound design, everybody's trying to reinvent like new shit. And whoa, chat just did some stuff. But like, you don't have to have something that's incredibly unique. How many songs have fucking 808s, right? Just more tools and knowledge to put in the toolbox. If it's something I'm not interested or needing at the time, doesn't mean I won't use it for something from the lesson. Yeah, and that's why like I hope people, I know that I've been doing like MPC stuff and hardware stuff, but I'm hoping that people that are in this genre still listen to it because you're going to see like how you can make stuff out of less resources. And that's why I love making bass within the MPC and stuff is because I'm like, I can't do this. I can't be like, yo, I'm going to just fucking go crazy with faceplant stuff and then, use it in the MPC. I'm like, no, I have to really know and really get the mechanics of it. And I've learned so much shit by using that little box, man. That thing has taught me so much. But when I come back to here and I start doing these again and I start making more basses and stuff, it's like, oh man, I have such a deeper understanding. I know how to make this even more prominent, even more powerful now that I get that. I think like to hear stuff that they recognize. Yeah, people like familiarity for sure. What kind of synthesizing do I think is the most difficult, like FM or physical modeling? I think resampling is probably the most difficult. But I also think that that's kind of an arbitrary question because it doesn't really, like, it depends on what you're trying to sound design, right? I think the hardest thing is not the synthesizer type. I think it's more of like a specific kind of sound in general. No, modular synthesis. Modular synthesis is the most difficult, and that's because of the limitations and restrictions of the interface itself. Have I seen the new modular hardware synth Malevolent? Looks sick. Does FM on both oscillators? I haven't. I don't own any hardware stuff. Well, I've got an MPC, but I wouldn't even count that as hardware. I do have a Poly and Play, but those aren't synthesizers. Those are beat sketchers. But yeah, modular synthesis, because that incorporates all of it. It incorporates it could be subtractive, it could be FM, it could be granular, it could be XYZ, but the way that you have to understand routing and the way that things go and the manual shit that you have to set up, yeah, by far modular synthesis is the most difficult. If you get modular synthesis, then you could learn any synth. You could learn any VST or anything. You'll know pretty much how to look at something and know exactly what to do with it. That's why I like Faceplant, because Faceplant teaches you all that shit. And I love, like, one other thing that I love about Faceplant is it shows you the routing this way, which is a recent update as far as version 2, but it's like, yo, this goes over here. This goes over here. This goes right there. That's what that's controlling. And so for a matter of like breaking a patch down and being like, what the fuck am I doing? Or what did, I'm going to try to deconstruct one of Alckemy's things. What the fuck is he controlling? It gives you that. Yeah, it gives you that option. I'm trying to think about what the next masterclass is going to be. I think the next one that I'm going to be doing, which is not going to be free, but it'll be like the next course or whatever, is I'm going to start an IDM course now that the halftime course is kind of wrapping up. Because that's just another genre that I really enjoy. But within that, you're going to see that if anybody, whoever is already Arcanum members or whatever, you'll see that there's going to be a lot of similarities. It's really just the change of rhythm and the change of like exponentially resampling on crack is kind of what it is. But it's also kind of therapeutic, which is why I love IDM so much, because you can literally just like make a very simple loop and just turn your brain off and resample it and just like start cutting shit up and going into, just going into like glitch mode. But yeah, guys, I don't really have anything else that I want to cover today. I want to thank you all for joining me. I wasn't expecting so many people in the stream, but if you guys can do me a favor, like even if you're not interested in anything that I have to offer for sale, that's totally fine. But if I could ask that you guys could like the video. If you guys are part of Reddit communities, that would be super helpful to just be like, yo, Alckemy just put out a masterclass or something. If you guys have like any way that you could just share this to somebody and just help me grow as a channel or help me get this information out to people, I can't tell you how much that not only means to me, but it also is incredibly like helpful. So yeah, that's all I could really say on that. Hell yeah, would love to see your take on IDM. I'm not sure if you've heard any of actually, I've already got a video. It's called How to Woog in Bitwig. So there's already that. I just haven't, that's like a 30-minute video that I didn't really go into in depth. And then you can also look up how to turn simple ideas into complex ones. That's actually a pretty popular video. And those are already out. Oh, you already watched that. Okay, cool. Just, for anybody out there that's interested in stuff that's already there. UFC? What? What about UFC? Also, hi, Aaron. Welcome. But yeah, I guess I will also say, if you all have any other questions about stuff that you want to learn from me, that if I can do it, I'll teach it. If I can't do it, I'll try to point you in the right direction. But outside of that, guys, thank you all so much. I think that I'll probably call it here. I'm going to eat some food and call it a day, and we'll be on not tomorrow because I'm going back to the gym because I'm feeling better, but Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe Friday I'll start thinking about the next tune that I want to write. But Wednesday we'll just be doing some bass design. I'm going to go back and revisit some of the mechanics of things. So if you guys are interested in seeing this stuff done from scratch, I'm not going to be teaching it, but I'll show you the process. I'm trying to think of what else I'm going to be doing, what else I'm going to do. Yeah, Friday we'll probably get back into just making beats from scratch. Pretty much my entire album was recorded on stream, so you guys can watch almost the whole thing if you are a basic member. Other than that, go listen to my album. It's on alckemy.com. It's coming out on Spotify and iTunes on the 9th. So yeah, much love to you all. I hope that you guys got some useful information, and I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Bye, everybody.